Greetings. Welcome back to the Black Pill. You should turn off this channel. It's bad for you. It's bad for your brain. But since you're here, one of humanity's most startling recent achievements is the detection of gravity waves. When two black holes collide and join together, the mass of those things is so intense, they create ripples in space-time itself. And those ripples emanate out from the point of their collision. Now, as they ripple out, they dissipate like waves in a pond moving in increasing concentric circles. They must decrease in energy as they go. And just recently, and I'll link Dr. Smethurst commentary on this in the comments of this video. Just recently, using lasers and wavelength interference patterns, scientists have discovered gravity waves, G waves, from the collision of two sort of middle-sized black holes. Absolutely astounding achievement. I'll let Dr. Becky sort of explain why. This talk is about apologetics. What do G-waves have to do with apologetics? Hang on, stick with me. Einstein, the theories of special and general relativity predict that gravity waves must be a thing, because space and time are one thing, space-time. Gravity fundamentally is not a force, it's a distortion of the stuff that space is made of that no one really at this point understands or really has any sensible conjecture about. General and special relativity are 100 years old. And for all of human history, we had no means to even attempt to falsify the idea of gravity waves. It's only right now that we have the technology and the expertise, the capacity, and ultimately the will to put this idea to the test, attempt to falsify it, and fail to falsify it. Now that we have failed to falsify that idea, have we proven it true? Well, science communicators know that they are talking to the laity, to lay people who don't have science training. And so physicists are for sure going to be out there saying, we have proven this true. Incorrect. We've attempted to prove it false and failed. Because we set up the lasers in this way and detected this distortion, and it correlates to when we were expecting that distortion based on the predicted collision of these two astronomical bodies. The observation matches the prediction, and therefore it's true. No. There could be other explanations. Other explanations are incredibly unlikely. Let's just have that clear. Other explanations are incredibly unlikely. This is the next best thing to proof. It is evidence, but evidence does not mean definitive proof. Evidence means we have a data point, we have a bloody sock, we have a knife with fingerprints on it, and those things go along with a certain theory of the case. And when you look at the evidence in a certain way, if there's enough evidence, you don't have to squint to imagine the veracity of the story. And that's where we are. There's sufficient evidence to go on believing that G-waves are a thing, and when black holes collide with one another, they distort space-time in this dramatic way that ripples out throughout the cosmos. It could still be false. It is very, very incredibly unlikely that it's false, but it could still be false. So we're talking apologetics. Apologetics is the art, the rhetorical method of getting people to believe what you believe by showing that it could be true. And Christians in particular go this extra step of saying that if it could be true, it must be true. There's a little town, again, I'll try and find and link this later on in the morning. There's a town somewhere in America that claims to be the center of the universe, and their claim is that the Greeks, oh, be careful with the Greeks, who are not a monolithic group. The Greeks said if it can be true, it must be true, and it's possible that this one town is the center of the entire universe because space is immeasurable, and therefore it must be true that this town is the center of the universe, and we can make that claim with some authority. And this is ultimately the claim of Christian apologetics. Sometimes you'll hear them make the more specific claim, if God could exist, God must exist. Because outside of God, who really can't be verified or falsified, it's really, really easy to come up with counterexamples. It's so easy to come up with examples of things that could be true, but you just don't want to believe because they're absurd, they're stupid. Could it be true that Democrat politicians run a child pornography ring out of a pizza shop in the American Midwest? I mean, shoot, man, anything's possible. But does that mean it is necessarily true? And we should all go to that pizza place with our rifles and look for pedophiles? Absolutely not. That is a complete and total absurdity. The chances of something like that being true are astronomically small. In the end, what we have here is a variation of the appeal to ignorance. You can't prove it false, and therefore I'm justified in continuing to believe it. And you can add extras around the edges, and you can repackage it a little, but that's ultimately what you have. We don't know, therefore aliens. The whole television program, Ancient Aliens, is predicated on the idea that because we can't ultimately know how the Egyptians built the pyramids, we're justified in saying it was the chariot of the gods. Gods came down, aliens came from space, and they used special technology and built the pyramids and built the Mayan pyramids and everything, you know, the rock walls in really high places in the Andes and so on. The big petroglyphs in the dirt up there. We don't know how they did it, we don't know why they did it, and therefore aliens must have done it. And that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. People do things for reasons we don't understand all the time. And we lose technology and we lose knowledge all the time. The Saturn V rockets that we used for the Apollo program, those schematics are gone. They're lost. We don't have the technology to recreate Saturn V in probably less than 20 years. We've lost that. We can't do that again. We have to start over from scratch. So it happens all the time. It only takes 100 or 200 years for historical events to be totally, irrevocably lost. Okay. I don't know, therefore Bigfoot. Periodically and at an increasing rate as people spend more time in more remote areas, we get grainy photographs and video of animals that could arguably be Bigfoot, arguably. And now look, man, in my space, in scientific discourse, if it's arguably true, I'm going to presume that it's false. All right? I need a better evidentiary basis to believe stuff than an argument for its truth. So we get these stories, these anecdotes, this grainy evidence, photos where if you squint, it might possibly be Bigfoot. And is that enough to believe in Bigfoot? Well, have we explored every square inch of the forests in the Pacific Northwest? No, we've not. Have we run drones and video through there? Have we put stop? Have we put motion activated cameras on every single tree in all of the forests in Maine? No, we've not done that. So is it possible that there is a gigantic anthropoid ape previously undescribed by science and absent from the fossil record that lives in these areas? Sure, man, I guess anything's possible. Anything at all is possible. Your mom might be an alien from the rings of Saturn, put here to study humans and convince them to vote for Trump so that we never make it into space and stop exploring the rings of Saturn. I don't know. Anything's possible. Jesus. But what affirmative evidence is there? What evidence is there for the plus side of the case? It's always this grainy bullshit stuff that you have to squint at, right? That you have to project into. Like the alleged face on Mars, it's a low resolution image. It's an ambiguous stimulus. And if you look at it in just the right way from the right frame, you can see a face in it. There's no face there. We go back, we do different overflights with higher resolution cameras, and that feature looks nothing at all like a face in high definition, nothing whatsoever like a face. So we have all these photos, we have all this testimony. Testimonials just aren't, I'm sorry, eyewitness testimony is not a good basis to believe things. It requires the honesty of the claimant. And that is a high bar to clear. People lie all the time. People are lying liars who lie, and it's not always investigators they're lying to. They could be lying to themselves. And people are often just wrong about stuff. They're just wrong. So you have this woodsman, this forest ranger, been in the woods as a professional for the last 22 years, and they see a thing, right? They see a thing. And because they watch History Channel from a certain frame, if you squint, that thing might have been Bigfoot. So we go out and we get the testimony and do an investigation. Oh, you say it leaned up against this tree right here. Well, that's fascinating. Let's go have a look. Oh my God, hairs. And sometimes these beings in these sightings leave behind physical evidence. We get hairs off the tree, we get a footprint, and for all the love and money in the world, it looks like a gigantic human footprint. And this thing starts coming around and harassing the person in their cabin, so they put down a spike strip in front of the front door. And lo and behold, this being, this alleged Bigfoot, steps on the spike strip. So now we have these data points about this organism. Okay, you can estimate its height, and its height is between 6 and 8 feet. And oh my God, Bigfoot, it's larger than a person. Well, at the low end of the range, it isn't larger than a person in a costume, but it's well within the range of a brown bear. It's well within the range of a brown bear standing on its back feet, trying to intimidate you or get a good view. And you analyze the hair that's stuck in the bark of the tree, and it's entirely 100% consistent with the hair of a brown bear. And look, it left a hair follicle. What a treasure. We can analyze that for DNA. You pull DNA out of it, you compare it with the database, and it comes up black bear. And you look at the footprint, the alleged Bigfoot footprint, and it certainly doesn't look like a bear footprint until you take a bear's foot and slap it in some mud and slide it forward as though the bear slipped. And then you get those little ridges that look like the ridges on primate feet, right? It's just a bear that stepped in some mud and slipped. And then you get the blood from that spike strip, and you get DNA, and it has the structure of bear blood and the DNA of a bear. And what kind of animal, if you get a grainy photograph and squint when it's on its back feet, looks like a Bigfoot, but has the hair of a brown bear and the blood of a brown bear and the stature of a brown bear and the footprints of brown bears, that's a brown bear. So at this point, like, we haven't examined every square foot of the Pacific Northwest forests or the forests in Maine. Yes, I grant you it is possible that there's a large anthropoid ape previously undiscovered. Am I compelled to then believe there is a large undiscovered anthropoid ape that never shits, never dies and leaves a corpse where we could discover it, is not in the fossil record? Am I compelled to believe that without any affirmative evidence? Absolutely not. So, what would it take to change my mind on Bigfoot? I'd need a body. I need a body, nothing less. And in fact, just a body isn't good enough. Like, am I qualified to look at a photograph of a body on the internet and conclude that it is necessarily Bigfoot? Absolutely not. I'm not a biologist. What I need is a team of independent biologists with open minds to autopsy that body and then put that autopsy in open source in the journals and make the evidence available to any scientist who wants to look at it. And then and it'll take 5 or 10 years, but I need consensus. I need a broad scientific consensus from various branches of biology that this is a previously undiscovered anthropoid ape or an alien or whatever the fuck it turns out to be. All right? And nothing less than that will change my mind. That's apologetics. Apologetics is saying I am compelled to believe in Bigfoot because Bigfoot is possible. And until such time as Bigfoot is impossible, I not only have to merely keep an open mind about the possibility, I have to believe in Bigfoot. And that's some shit right there. Well, that's Bigfoot. That's aliens too. And it's ghosts and it's race differences, and it's most neurological differences between men and women in the brain. And where does that leave God? Where does that leave God? Humanity needs something better than apologetics to make the case for God. So is it possible that somewhere out there in the universe is a benevolent deity who knows the smallest detail of human activity and what you're thinking and how often you masturbate and so forth? Sure. Yeah, of course. Of course it's possible. Does that mean I'm compelled to believe it? Well, if that's the argument for God, then I'm compelled to believe a whole bunch of other weird shit. Yeah, that's just not strong enough. That it can't be falsified is not only not strong enough. That it can't be in principle falsified means it just isn't an interesting question. It's just not an interesting question. Yeah, I know. Like, for you, the existence or non-existence of God might be the central question of your experience. And just speaking as a scientist from a science perspective, it just isn't at all interesting because there's no way to resolve it. There's nothing I can do to resolve the question one way or another. That absolutely does not mean I'm compelled to believe it. Without a lot of like really affirmative evidence, more than grainy photographs, more than eyewitness testimony, I have to put that aside. I have to put that aside and just go with the evidence of our real senses. All right, so I mean, then we get into a bunch of stupid stuff like, but look around at the magnificence of go outside and look at a sunrise. And I mean, a sunrise is subjectively beautiful. It's subjectively beautiful, but as for evidence for God, I mean, a sunrise could be evidence for a whole lot of different things, and so we need more definitive evidence than that. Is it harmless? Is it harmless to believe in God based on apologetics? Well, yeah, because it trains you to believe what you want to believe instead of things for which we have more definitive proof. Okay? People will often say, like, I have no particular problem with religion. And I'm going to go the other way. I have no problem in general with religion. I have a particular problem with religion, with faith, which is that faith teaches you through things like sophistry and apologetics to believe what you want instead of what is true. And that's a problem. That's how we get fascists. Religion leads to fascism. Not necessarily, but religion trains you to do mental gymnastics to defend whatever belief that you want to hold, and that's how you get fascism. You know, that fascism requires those mechanisms, and fascists can purloin your brain using those mechanisms. So that's a problem. Further, the possibility that God exists does not at all mean the possibility that your individual version of truth exists. That your specific reading of the Bible must be true. Right? That's an even further and more absurd claim. We can pretty definitively rule out Adam and Eve, all right? Literal readings of the Bible just don't lead anywhere because the Bible contains internal inconsistencies. Two people can read the Bible and get entirely different impressions from it. That is poor inter-rater reliability because the Bible's internal logic doesn't stand up to scrutiny. You have to do a lot of apologetics and sophistry to get to a point where it makes any kind of sense for an individual person doing an individual reading. And then the sorts of things you'd want to do at a policy level based on reading of religious text, that's where you get the Taliban. That's where you get the American Taliban, the American hard sort of Texas right. Anti-abortion and pro-death penalty kind of stuff. That's all of that stuff. Saying America should have a state religion and only straight people should get married and straight people should definitely get married and there should never be abortions and it's every man for himself. Nobody should get any help from the government for any reason, and we should deny racism and climate change. All of that stuff flows from literal readings of the Bible that flow from apologetic arguments for faith. Is it only religious people who do apologetics? Well, the very word comes from defenses of religion in like the first century. Certainly other people use apologetics, which is why it's a problem. Trump is a liar. He's a fascist liar surrounded by fascist liars. Trumpism is fascism. And when he comes out and says an absurd thing like people could inject bleach into their bodies. Yeah, inject yourself with bleach if you get COVID, and that'll fix it. Or COVID is not very resistant to sunlight. right? So outdoors on surfaces, COVID breaks down in UV light. So we should somehow get that into your body. And that'll cure the COVID. Literally blow sunshine up your ass. That's absurd and ridiculous and insane and bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. But the apologists come in and say, well, he didn't mean literally, or he was joking, Schrodinger's douchebag, this thing that you've heard so much about lately, or you're taking him too seriously, or he meant doctors, blah, 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 UV scopes, something, something. All the Trump whisperers come out and they give you excuses. They give you excuses, not reasons. Not reasons, excuses. It's where I'd like to wind up in this section, I think, is that to understand the world, what we need are good reasons to believe things are true. But finding reasons to believe things true is very difficult. And so where we often just conclude is with excuses to believe things true, right? And that's apologetics. Apologetics is an out. Well, you can't prove me wrong, and so therefore I have an excuse to continue to believe this falsehood. To be a racist, to keep eating pizza and cheeseburgers when my doctor says I have a heart condition, to keep smoking cigarettes even though I wake up in the morning and cough for 30 minutes before I start the day, to believe in God even though the pastor is saying some increasingly disturbing things about race and what we should do to help other people, which is nothing, and we should all vote Trump. And to continue to believe in a political party that maybe did some good in the 70s and 80s by questioning the welfare state, but lately has gone decidedly fashy, right? Apologetics is just an excuse to believe bullshit. This has been The Black Pill. You definitely shouldn't keep watching this channel.